In the previous study in this series, we dealt with the ministry of Jesus and how Jesus handled evil spirits or demons. In this study, we're going to deal with the nature and the activity of demons in general. But before we do this, it's important to clear up some questions of terminology. In this, as in various other respects, the influence of the King James Version on English-speaking people has been tremendous, and many people are influenced by it without realizing exactly how far it affects their thinking. So I'm going to take a little while to explain some of the basic Greek words that are used in the New Testament and to clear up some misconceptions that arise out of translations that we're familiar with. First of all, let's consider the word devil. This is a transliteration, really, of the Greek word diabolos, which is there in your outline. And the literal meaning of the word diabolos is slanderer. And used in the singular, it is normally a title of Satan himself and should not be used of any other person but Satan. The other word that we're going to deal with mainly in this study is the word demon, which does not occur in the King James Version. I'll show you in a moment why. The English word demon is derived directly from a Greek word daimon, or an alternative form of the same word, which is daimonion. You might imagine that daimonion is a diminutive of demon, but that is not correct. Actually, it's a neuter adjective, and the two words really mean essentially the same thing. And as I say, the English word is demon. Now, a demon is a spirit regarded by the heathen as divine or semi-divine. And heathen religion normally cultivates or seeks to propitiate these demons. All heathen religions really center around the cultivation of demons. Now, this word is wrongly translated in the King James Version, devil, or more commonly, devils, in the plural. It should not be translated devil. That word should be reserved for diabolos, the title of Satan. This word demon, daimon, daimonion, is used in New Testament Greek interchangeably with two other expressions, which are evil spirit or unclean spirit. So we have really three expressions which apparently in the New Testament are used interchangeably: demon, translated in the King James Version devil, evil spirit, or unclean spirit. Just to show you that these phrases are interchangeable, look with me at the scriptures given there in your outline. We are looking in various cases at parallel accounts of the same incident. In Matthew 15:22, we are told about this Canaanitish woman who came to Jesus because her daughter needed deliverance from an evil spirit. And she is recorded as saying, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil," but more correctly, a demon. Now in Mark 7:25, the writer of Mark's Gospel says about the same woman in the same incident, "For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet." So where Matthew says demon, Mark says unclean spirit, and they're referring to the same thing. Then in Mark chapter 5 and verse 2, the well-known incident which is usually called the incident of the Gadarene demoniac, it says that when Jesus was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now this incident is also recorded in Luke chapter 8, and in verse 27 of Luke chapter 8, Luke says, "And when he went forth to land, there met him out of the city a certain man which had devils long time," devils being more literally demons. So where Mark says an unclean spirit, Luke says demons. These are used interchangeably. Another passage that illustrates the same truth is found in the book of Revelation in the 16th chapter. The 16th chapter of Revelation, verses 13 and 14. John says, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirit of devils working miracles. Devils, but more correctly, demons. So in verse 13 he calls them unclean spirits, and in verse 14 he calls them demons. I think therefore it is quite correct to say that these 3 expressions are used interchangeably in New Testament Greek: unclean spirit, evil spirit, and demon. Now let's consider the Greek phrases used to describe the activity of these demons or unclean spirits in relationship to human beings. Now here is where the greatest misunderstanding arises out of the King James Version. There are actually 3 alternative phrases used in New Testament Greek to describe the fact that a person is in some way troubled or tormented by an evil spirit or a demon. The first phrase, which is very common, is to have an unclean spirit or an evil spirit. We'll look at the various passages given in your outline where this is found. We'll glance at them quickly, not pausing to dwell on any of them. Matthew 11, verse 18, Jesus says, John, that's John the Baptist, came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he hath a devil, he hath a demon. So John the Baptist was accused of having a demon by the people of his day. And then in Mark 7:25, we've already just looked at that, but we can look at it again for a moment. This is about the Syrophoenician woman. Mark 7:25, a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit. And then in Mark 9:17, the man said to Jesus, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. That's a particular type of unclean or evil spirit, a dumb spirit, one that refuses to allow a person to speak. But the boy is said to have a dumb spirit. Then we turn to Luke's Gospel, the 4th chapter, and verse 33. It says, in the synagogue there was a man which had a spirit of an unclean devil, an unclean demon. There again we see in that verse that an unclean spirit and a demon are used interchangeably or together. This man is said to have had a spirit of an unclean demon. And in Luke chapter 8 and verse 27, a passage we've looked at already, there was a man who had devils or demons a long time. And in Luke 13, verse 11, we read, behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bound together, and could in no wise lift up herself. This woman had a spirit of infirmity, physical weakness, which prevented her from straightening her spine, what we would call, I suppose, spinal curvature. But in the New Testament, it's attributed to a spirit of infirmity which this woman had. Then in John's Gospel, there are quite a number of passages where this phrase, to have a demon or an unclean spirit, is used. John chapter 7, verse 20, the people answered and said unto him, that's Jesus, thou hast a devil, thou hast a demon. They accused him of having a demon. And in John chapter 8, the phrase occurs several times. Verse 48, the Jews said to Jesus, say we not well that thou art a Samaritan and hast a demon? Jesus answered, I have not a demon. And in verse 52 of the same chapter, then said the Jews unto him, now we know that thou hast a demon. And in John chapter 10, verses 20 and 21, many of them said, he hath a demon and is mad. Notice, being mad is more or less equated with having a demon. Others said, these are not the words of him that hath a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? So we see that this phrase, to have a demon, is very commonly used in the New Testament. The second phrase, which is closely parallel, is to be in an unclean or an evil spirit. Now, this hardly makes sense in English, and in the King James Version, the preposition in is translated with, but actually the literal Greek is in. Let's look at two passages in Mark's Gospel where this occurs. Mark chapter 1 and verse 23. There was in their synagogue a man with an unclean spirit, but the Greek says in an unclean spirit. And he cried out, saying, "Let us alone," and so on. And in Mark 5:2, it says, when he came out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. But the Greek says in an unclean spirit. I would say that the closest modern English would be to be under the influence of an unclean spirit. In other words, this man was not always under the influence of this spirit, but at times this spirit manifested itself through him, and then that is expressed in New Testament Greek by saying he was in an unclean spirit. In the Old Testament, it said of the false prophets that they prophesied in Baal. In other words, they prophesied in the spirit of Baal and not in the spirit of God. The third phrase, which is also extremely common and is the important one because it's been so completely mistranslated in the King James Version, is a verb in Greek, daimonidzomai, which could very well be rendered in English, to be demonized. It's as close a rendering as you could possibly get, and in the English it has precisely the same connotation as it does in Greek. It means in some way or another to be under the influence or attack of a demon. It doesn't say more than that, just to be demonized. Unfortunately, for the sake of English-speaking Christians around the world and through the ages, the King James Version has translated this phrase to be demonized by the English phrase to be possessed with devils. And this has given rise to more understanding than any other single phrase, I imagine, in the King James Version, because the word possess is completely misleading and has nothing in the Greek to support it. Immediately you use the word possess, you bring to the minds of English-speaking people the suggestion of total ownership. If I possess my Bible, every page in the Bible belongs to me, not some of them. And so whenever you speak about having an evil spirit, a person reacts in an angry way and says, "Do you mean I'm possessed by the devil?" And they've got that from the King James. The King James, the Greek doesn't say that. The Greek says a person is demonized in some way or another, which is not further specified by that one word, under the influence or the control or the attack of a demon. Now, there's no suggestion that the demon possesses the person in the sense of having totally taken him over. Let's look at some of the passages in the New Testament where this verb, to be demonized, is used. Starting in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 24. It says, "His fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with divers diseases and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, those which were being demonized, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, the paralysis, and he healed them." Various different categories of people who were brought to Jesus, those who were sick, those who were tormented, those who were paralyzed, those who were lunatic, and those who were being demonized, attacked or affected in some way by demons. In Matthew chapter 8, the word occurs 3 times. Verse 16 says, "When the even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils," many that were being demonized. Verse 28, "When he was come to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 possessed with devils." But the Greek says 2 who were being demonized. And verse 33 of the same chapter, They that kept them fled and went their ways into the city and told everything and what was befallen to the possessed of the devils," to the people who had been demonized. In Matthew 9:32, it says, "As they went out, behold, they brought to him a dumb man possessed with a devil, a dumb man who was being demonized." And the evidence that he was being demonized was his dumbness. The only way in which the demon affected him was by making him dumb. The moment the demon went out, the man was no longer dumb. it would be completely incorrect to suggest that this man was possessed in the sense of totally taken over. One area of his personality only was affected, and that was the speech centers. And then in Matthew 12:22, we have a similar case. There was brought unto him one possessed with the devil, one who was being demonized, blind and dumb. And he healed him, insomuch that the blind and dumb both spake and saw. In this instance, the demon is responsible for the blindness and the dumbness. That's all, the only areas of the man that he controlled were those that affected his sight and his speech. And when that demon went out, the man could see and speak. To use the word possessed there is completely incorrect. And then in Matthew 15:22, we've looked at this twice already. This is the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. And she said, my daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. The same word is used in Greek, though the King James uses the word vexed instead of possessed there. But the Greek word is demonized. Then in Mark chapter 1, verse 32, it says that even when the sun did set, they brought unto him all that were diseased, and them that were possessed with devils, them that were being demonized. And Mark 5:15, 16, and 18, in the account of the Gadarene demoniac, we have the phrase used 3 times. I don't believe it's really necessary to read them out because it's just a repetition of what we've seen before. And then in Luke 8:36, which also refers to the Gadarene demoniac, we have the same phrase. They also which saw it told them by what means he that was possessed of the devils was healed. He that had been demonized was healed. And incidentally, the Greek word used for healing there is the Greek word for salvation. He was saved. This is part of salvation, is deliverance from evil spirits. So here we see these facts then. First of all, that there are probably 3 different expressions used to describe these persons or entities: demons, unclean spirits, evil spirits. And sometimes they're specified more precisely, for instance, a spirit of infirmity or a dumb spirit. The second phrase that's used is an unclean spirit, and the third phrase that's used is an evil spirit. And the language that's used in connection with these is to have an unclean spirit, or to be in an unclean spirit, that is, under the influence of an unclean spirit, or to be demonized, to be in some way affected by a demon. Now, having cleared up, I trust, though I'm not absolutely sure, some of the misunderstandings created by the King James Version, let's go on to consider the nature and activity of demons. What I have to say now I believe to be true. Part of it is directly supported by Scripture, part of it comes by inference. And I want you to be very clear that if you do not agree with my inferences, that's all right. But I have given a good deal of time and thought to this and studied the Scriptures fairly carefully, and I am fairly well convinced that what I say is correct. Demons are spirits without bodies. You could say, if you want to, disembodied spirits, but that would carry the implication that they once had bodies. Now, I believe they did once have bodies, but that is an assumption or an inference which would have to be dealt with separately. We need to distinguish between angels and demons. As far as I understand it, they're completely distinct, and I would like to give you 3 points in which we can distinguish them. First of all, angels have wings, and they fly. Look in Daniel 9, verse 21. Daniel had a visitation from an angel, the angel Gabriel, and he's incidentally also called a man. And it says there in Daniel 9:21, yea, whiles I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. The Bible pictures most of the heavenly beings as having wings. Angels, cherubim, and seraphim are all pictured as having wings and being able to fly. And there are various references in Scripture to their flying. Now, turn to Matthew chapter 12, and you'll see that evil spirits apparently do not fly. And I believe this is correct. Matthew 12:43, Jesus says, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest. There's no suggestion whatever that he has any other means of transportation but walking. Secondly, they have different places of habitation. Angels are at home. They normally inhabit the heavenlies. There's many scriptures to this effect. We'll look at just 3. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spirits of wickedness in the heavenlies, where I understand this to refer to Satan's angelic kingdom in the heavenlies. And all the persons there referred to are angelic. In Jude, the 6th verse, and in case anybody has difficulty in locating Jude, it's just the last one before Revelation. Jude 6, the writer says, the angels which kept not their first estate or their first area of rule, but left their own habitation, God hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness. These angels that left the heavenlies and descended to earth, and I believe scriptures elsewhere make it plain that they came in order to cohabit with human women, are the exception. And because of this act, which was so contrary to God's ordained plan of being, they were confined in a special place, different from all others. But you notice that they left their own habitation, their own appointed dwelling place, which was in the heavenlies. And then in Revelation 12, verses 7 and 8, a passage that describes events still future, as I believe, it says, there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, that's the devil, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. Up till that point, their place is in heaven. What happens after that is entirely contrary to the normal plan of God. It's a very brief span of time, which Revelation speaks about, when the devil is cast out of the heavenlies and is compelled to take up residence on earth. But this is not the normal. This is the abnormal. Demons, on the other hand, as I understand it, are earthbound. They have no ability to get outside the realm of earth. Thirdly, angels have bodies of their own and do not normally desire to occupy another body. In fact, for an angel, as I understand it, to be inside a human body would be a kind of prison. On the other hand, demons, if they have one conspicuous characteristic, it is this, that they have an intense craving to enter in and dwell in a body, preferably that of a human being, but in the last resort, rather that of a pig than to be without a body to dwell in. By way of confirmation for this, let's look for a moment in Matthew chapter 12, verses 43 through 45. Jesus is speaking, and he says, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return into my house from whence I came out. By the phrase, my house, he means the body of the person that he was living in. So we see that he cannot find rest outside of a body. He wanders around until he's able to enter into a body. If possible, he'll go back to the body that he left. If not, he must look for another body. And he regards the body that he dwells in as his house, his dwelling place. The first time I ever had a real dramatic confrontation with a woman in the matter of deliverance, the first evil spirit that I commanded to come out, which was the spirit of hatred, it answered me in a very rebellious and surly voice and said, I'm not coming out. This is my house. I've lived here 35 years and I'm not coming out. So that Jesus is not using figurative speech at all when he says that the evil spirit says, I will return into my house. In Mark chapter 5, the incident of the Gadarene demoniac, we see also this intense desire on the part of the evil spirits not to be left without a body. They are pleading with Jesus, and it says in Mark 5 verse 10, He, the man in whom the evil spirits were, besought him, Jesus, much that he would not send them away out of the country. This is a remarkable revelation, really. Now there was there nigh unto the mountains a great herd of swine feeding, and all the demons besought Jesus, saying, Send us into the swine, that we may enter into them. And forthwith Jesus gave them leave. They could not bear the thought of being without some sort of a body to dwell in. As I say, preferably they would choose the body of a human being. But rather than be without a body, they would choose a pig or a dog or a monkey or a lion. I believe there are many animals which from time to time are occupied by evil spirits. The reason why they desire to be in a body is that they all have characteristic lusts or evil desires or evil propensities which can only be gratified while they are in a body. For instance, an alcohol demon has to have a body through which to consume alcohol. A blaspheming demon must have a tongue through which to blaspheme. A demon of lust must have the emotions and the organs of a body through which to lust. They cannot fulfill their cravings and desires unless they have a body through which to do it. And as Jesus indicated, they're like people without a home, restless, unable to settle down, without any kind of peace until they find a body to enter into. This brings us face to face with the fact that every one of us is surrounded by unseen hordes of evil spirits who would dearly like to be inside each one of us. We cannot change that situation. The only thing we can do is make very sure they don't get in. But this is part of the total Christian conflict that we're involved in, and the main situation cannot be changed. Jesus, as I've pointed out in my previous study, but I'll say it again, did not cast evil spirits into the pit or into hell. He just caused them to leave the body that they were occupying, with the implication that they would be free to enter the next body that they could get into. And as it was then, so it is now. The next important thing about demons is that they have all the marks of personality. They are persons. And in most cases, you will not deal effectively with evil spirits until you realize that you're dealing with persons. My particular problem that tormented me for years was the problem of depression. And I tried every means I could think of to deal with it as a thing, a psychological attitude, a mental condition, whatever you like to call it. And I got nowhere. One day, reading the scripture and looking in Isaiah 61:3, I met this phrase, the spirit of heaviness. And at that moment, by a flash of revelation, I saw that my problem was not a mental attitude, not a psychological condition, not a fixation or whatever language you like to use. It was a person that was deliberately tormenting me. And when I realized I was dealing with a person, I was about 80% of the way to victory immediately. Up to that time, in dealing with this enemy, I was, as Paul says, like one beating the air. I was like a boxer blindfolded, trying to strike an enemy who could see me and always could avoid my blows, because I did not know what I was dealing with. And you'll find all through the ministry of Jesus, he invariably treated demons as persons. He spoke to them, and he spoke about them in the category of persons. Let's look at this for a moment and substantiate it out of Scripture. There are various recognized marks or attributes of personality. As far as I know, demons possess every one. The first one is will. And we have already seen in Matthew 12, verses 43 and following, that a demon has a strong will.